Welcome to episode 3 of the Coaches versus Cancer podcast presented by Fidelity Bank. I'm Tom Ferguson. Joining me, as always, the head coach for Scranton Prep's boys basketball team, Coach Andrew Kettel, the leader of Coaches versus Cancer here in NEPA. And Coach, excited for another episode.
Yeah, and this is a big one because it's our Suits and Sneakers week, which is our our big week during the basketball season with Coaches versus Cancer. So a lot of fun, a lot of things to talk about, and some great guests coming in today.
Absolutely. Going to be talking to a couple different students from around the area. Bobby Craig from Valley View coming on the program. Alyvia Svetovich and Sophia Glogowski from the Scranton girls basketball team joining us. And Coach Rich Emmons from Elk Lake also joining us on the program today. And he has a very important story about cancer and cancer survival. And of course, we're talking about Coaches versus Cancer and Suits and Sneakers week here. It's been a minute since we've gotten a chance to sit down and talk, Coach. You know, the last time we were kind of just getting into the start of the regular season here in Northeast Pennsylvania. And now we sit in the middle of January and we're kind of into the league schedule and everything. What's kind of going on with you right now?
Well, I think it's to be expected. A lot of good games, a lot of good teams, some teams, emerging, that maybe some people didn't think would.
Right.
There's some teams that are having better seasons than expected, and there's the veteran teams that are back, and the usual suspects with Abington Heights and Mid Valley, Holy Cross. Susquehanna is very good up in Division 4 on the boys' side, that is. And
Right.
then I think the same goes to be said with the girls. Dunmore is always there, and Scranton Prep has a good team this year. Riverside is a good,
Had a really good team.
very good girls team. So. And I think it's a fun time of year because we're going through the grind of the regular season and looking forward to the playoffs, but trying to take it one game at a time.
Is this kind of the point of the regular season? You got a handful, 6 or 7 probably league games left before district playoffs really start to kick into gear. Is this kind of I guess I should phrase it this way. At this point in the season, what as a coach are you looking for your team to do? Like, is this kind of like, all right, we need to turn it on, you need to kick it up a notch? Is this where you want to start to play better and start to peak a little better? What's kind of your feel on it?
Well, at this point, the exhibition schedule is trying to get you prepared for league play. League play is a grind because every night you're getting everyone's best shot. It's rivalry based. The kids know each other well. They've been playing against each other since they started playing basketball.
Right.
So at this point, from a coaching standpoint, at least from what we try and do, is we try and make sure that the guys are healthy and fresh because you're playing 2 nights a week. You're practicing 6 days a week. You can only practice 6 out of the 7 days, including games. You can only, be with the team. So you have to take 1 day off. So you're trying to work that day off into the right spot in the week, depending on what games are ahead.
Right.
You're watching film with the team. Maybe you shorten practices up. I know we try and shorten practices up a little bit to save on the legs of the guys. So we're trying to stay healthy. We're trying to stay sharp and hopefully, fight through the ups and downs of a season.
And the interesting part about that, at least as far as Coaches versus Cancer is concerned, is you're trying to conserve energy, trying to make sure everybody's healthy, but then you get something that's as emotionally jarring and as charged as something like what we're going to talk about with Suits and Sneakers week with the Coaches versus Cancer games.
Yeah. And it's a big night, your Coaches versus Cancer game. Especially personally at our school at Scranton Prep. This year we're excited because for the first time we're having a boys and girls doubleheader Thursday night, which is pretty cool against Wall and Paulpack.
Mm-hmm.
So at 5:30, our girls varsity will play Wall and Paulpack's girls varsity. After that game, we'll have our Coaches versus Cancer program. And then after the program, probably around 7:15, 7:20, the boys, Scranton Prep and Wall and Paulpack will tip off. So we're hoping that, both schools will bring a lot of students and families and friends to the game to showcase both our girls and our boys and how both schools and all 4 teams are coming together in the fight against cancer. So it should be a fun, emotional, night for a cause bigger than basketball and bigger than ourselves.
Right. We talk a lot about the Coaches versus Cancer events here in NEPA on this program and about the different uniqueness to it. And I, have broadcast actually a couple of the Scranton Prep Coaches versus Cancer games while you were in charge. And I was always struck by just the amount of people that were there and the emotional stories. And then, you know, you had the kind of the walk around the court with cancer survivors. It gets pretty dusty in there pretty fast, you know? It's tough.
And what we're trying to do is just trying to get everyone in the mindset that, you know, whether it's Coaches versus Cancer or another cancer initiative, be it with the American Cancer Society or not, as long as people are getting involved, the more people involved, the more initiatives, the more money raised, the more research it's able to be done can hopefully crush cancer, which is what we're trying to do. So, you know, those nights there's some tear jerking moments.
Sure.
But I think it puts things in perspective.
Now, there's obviously things that people can do at these different events as well in terms of, you know, there's 50-50 drawings, there's raffles for different prizes. They also have like one of these fine T-shirts, I'm sure, will be at almost all of the Coaches versus Cancer games. So what are some of the ways people can get involved here?
Well, what's great about our campaign, especially locally here in Northeast Pennsylvania, is we allow each school to come up with what they want to do to raise money and raise awareness for Coaches versus Cancer. So some of the staples are the T-shirts. This year, this is our T-shirt that we'll be selling at the schools with our sponsors on the back and our hashtag Crush Cancer. So T-shirts. A lot of schools will do basket raffles. They'll have a half-court shot at halftime.
Right.
They get creative. I know Elk Lake does many things, like they have a citrus sale in the beginning of the school year, and that money goes to Coaches versus Cancer. Some schools have dress down days. Some schools have dances. So that's one of the things that's really unique about our program is teams and schools and students can get behind it in any way they choose.
Right.
We also have some socks, basketball socks that the players can wear this year and some phone pop sockets, some pens and things like that people can purchase. And the money goes to, you know, our campaign.
Right.
And some other schools are making their own shirts because they want to do something more with their school. So, you know, those are the things that people can you know, purchase or make a donation at their games.
Now, I noticed you said the players are going to be wearing these. Is Andrew Kettel going to be wearing these?
Of course.
Of course. Just want to make sure.
Of course.
Just want to make sure. It's it's always an exciting kind of week here in NEPA because I think, you know, and we'll talk about this with Coach Emmons and certainly the students we're going to have on the program. It's something that emotionally kind of approaches a senior night in a lot of ways, and just how much students look forward to it and how much everybody that maybe doesn't have a ton of connections to basketball or sports or something still feels the need to be involved and be a part of it.
Yeah, definitely. And it brings all the communities together. And you know, the one thing that always stands out to me as a coach, when the game is over, win or lose, you'll see students from both schools, coaches getting their photos together, doing, you know, talking about the campaign. And it kind of, you know, it's bigger than the game that night, although obviously everyone's playing hard and coaching hard and trying to win. But I think the big picture is the, you know, the campaign and what we're really there for. So
we got a lot to get to this episode, talking to a couple different students from around Northeast Pennsylvania and Coach Rich Emmons from Elk Lake and nearby up in Susquehanna County. So let's get into it here on the Coaches versus Cancer podcast presented by Fidelity Bank. It's the Coaches versus Cancer podcast presented by Fidelity Bank, and we're joined now by our first high school basketball player here, Coach Bobby Craig from Valley View, joining us. Bobby, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming on. What's kind of been your impression so far of the season for the Cougars?
We're off to an okay start. We're 10-5. We started a little slow, but we're starting to pick it up a little bit. We've played a very good game against West and a tough loss for Scranton Prep which was an exciting game to play in.
Was it an exciting game for you, Coach?
It's always an exciting game.
Very
Absolutely. You know, we had some battles last year,
of course, yes.
And these guys are all back. And we had the majority of our guys back. So we knew that playing these guys this year is going to be definitely good basketball. They're a great, well-coached team with Coach Purpose, and these guys have been playing together a long time. So it's a great basketball game against two two good groups of kids.
Well, you mentioned last year that was a nice run for you guys into the district playoffs and certainly in the states as well. Playing, I actually saw your game down at King's College against Nanacoke. It was really back and forth. It was a really exciting game. What was that like for you guys last year to kind of finally get that playoff experience and kind of have that run for your team?
Yeah, we didn't really know what it was like going into the playoffs, but when we got there, we were just so excited that we just felt like we couldn't lose. And we played another great, exciting game against Scranton Prep in the district final. We came up a little short, but we still felt that we played very well.
What was that like for you? Because I'm assuming that was probably the first time you played in the arena, right?
Mm-hmm.
What was that experience like? How was that different than just walking into your random high school gym around here in NEPA?
Yeah, it was unbelievable. Even like the locker rooms, we walked in, everyone was like so excited to play there. When we stepped out on the court, it was like, wow, this is real.
Was there a little jitters walking out there?
A little bit in the first quarter.
Yeah. And now a lot of the talk about the arena too is that sometimes it's a little tough to shoot in there. Was that kind of your impression?
A little bit at first. Like it's different. Like with the crowd in the background, it was a little difficult at first, but we figured it out.
I have to say, pretty neat for me personally because when Bobby was a little guy, his dad was the assistant coach at Valley View. So I've known Bobby. I've known who he's since probably he's like 5 or 6 years old coming to games. And it reminds me now because my sons come with me to all my games. So it's pretty cool for me. And I know his mom and dad really well. So to be able to watch him perform and see him grow up as a little guy with his Valley View shirt on when he was a little dude. And now he's a senior and a leader on Valley View's team. It's really cool to put all that together. So, and he's a great player.
Well, sure. And Bobby, obviously we're talking about Suits and Sneakers Week here in NEPA with Coaches versus Cancer. You've been a part of the program for a little bit now. What does Coaches versus Cancer kind of mean to you and to Valley View?
It means a lot to our community. I mean, every year for the last 4 years, a lot of people have come out to our games and supported. And it means a lot to me because my grandpa was diagnosed he actually died of cancer, pancreatic cancer, in 2011. So, okay. I mean, it's special to me.
So you have that kind of personal connection to it and to see the community kind of come out and support that and kind of be a part of it. What do you see out of the Valley View community when you have a Coaches versus Cancer game?
Everyone's always supporting. We always have baskets, raffles, everything. Everyone's always donating. Everyone's always into the game. We always bring on a big crowd for the Coaches versus Cancer game.
As a player, Bobby, does when the schedule comes out and you're anticipating the season, do you guys feel a little bit different of when the Coaches versus Cancer game is and what game it is, and is there a little bit different feeling that night than just a regular maybe Tuesday or Friday night in the LAC 1 league?
Of course, Coach Kerpus it's a special night for him too, and he always tells it's a special night. It's a really special night, and he always tells us to play a little harder that night for a good reason.
Yeah, I know Coach Kerpus has had some cancer in his family, and I know that he takes this the campaign and the games and everything like you said. He really their whole Valley View program really just takes it up to another level. Well,
we've seen with Valley View's success in other sports, we've seen kind of the community come together to support the team and in whatever sport it may be, basketball, football, softball a few years ago when they won a state championship,
baseball
and baseball too, it's to see them support the sports. I mean, that's nothing that we're surprised about, but Bobby, to kind of see the community come together for things like that, what does that kind of mean to you?
It means a lot. Like it means a lot. The community comes together. Like it's really great. I love seeing it.
And does that kind of give you a little more pride when it comes to Valley View?
Definitely. It makes me play harder when I see it. Like it makes me feel good about myself when I'm out there.
That's great.
So how much are you looking forward to this year's Coaches versus Cancer game?
Well, it's going to be my last one I'm going to be playing in, so it's going to mean a lot to me.
So does it kind of approach, we talked about this with Coach Emmons, does it kind of approach a almost like a senior night kind of anticipation to it?
Yes, of course. It's going to be one of my last home games, so I'm going to try to play my hardest.
So who are you guys playing?
We're playing Wallenpaupack.
That's a good team.
Mm-hmm. They're solid.
Yeah.
Well, that should be a good one. We're excited to see kind of what happens with you the rest of the year. What are your plans for next year?
I'm not really sure yet. I'm applied to a couple of schools. I'm in between the University of Scranton, Penn State, or Syracuse.
Those are all fine. Now, listen, I'm a Penn State grad, so I kind of lean there, but those all sound like fine.
Yeah,
schools.
so are my parents. They're leaning towards Penn State too.
I had a feeling. No, it's those are. So, do you know what you're going to study yet, or you're still kind of up in the air?
I'm at a couple schools. I'm going to probably study mathematics, but at Syracuse they have a program called sports analytics.
Okay,
it's kind of like math and like computer science and it combined with sports. So,
all right,
cool. We'll see.
That sounds awesome.
Very cool.
That sounds really exciting. Well, Bobby, we appreciate you joining us here on the Coaches versus Cancer podcast.
Of course. Thank you for having me. I appreciate
Good luck,
it.
Bobby.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So thanks to Bobby Craig from Valley View for joining us here on the Coaches versus Cancer podcast, presented by Fidelity Bank. And, Valley View's had a good run the last couple of years, especially last year getting into the state playoffs, getting all the way to the district final. And Bobby has been a kind of a big part of that. And it's, you talk about the football team just having their success this past fall. I mean, a lot of these guys that played on the football team now playing on the basketball team, it's just kind of like a culture they're kind of building, at least with their athletics.
Oh yeah. Valley View's always, always has had great teams in multiple sports, baseball, football, basketball, softball. And their community is always behind them 100% at every level. So, they display that with Coaches versus Cancer, and they've been one of our top fundraising schools since we started. Coach Pagula, Larry Pagula, who's now a principal, was their coach before Coach Kerpus. And when we started this, he was on our planning committee. And so, Valley View has been 100% on board behind Coaches versus Cancer for the past 11 years. And we can't thank them enough, along with everyone else who's supporting this.
So as we move forward here with our Coaches versus Cancer Suits and Sneakers Week edition of the podcast here, we've got a couple more students from Scranton High School to talk to. The Coaches versus Cancer podcast presented by Fidelity Bank. And now, Coach Kettel, we're joined by two players from the Scranton girls basketball team. We talked to their head coach last episode, and now we're talking to two players from the team, Alyvia Svetovich and Sophia Glogowski. Girls, thanks for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So let's kind of talk about the season so far. We knew it was going to be a tougher go for you guys, kind of figuring out offensively what you were going to do and how to kind of replace, what Sierra Lloyd was able to do for you guys the last couple seasons. But seems like, 2 wins in your last couple games, you might be trying to figure that out a little bit.
The beginning of the season was definitely rough. It just because we have a lot of new girls and we're losing girls and stuff like that. So it was hard for us to kind of get in our groove. But now we're kind of past like the arguing stage and we're really starting to play together. And I think we'll be all right.
So you had some growing pains.
Yes,
in other words.
for sure. Yeah.
Well, that's important. It's important to have that. And what's it kind of been like for you guys to kind of go through that and to now kind of have that understanding, like, all right, we know what we need to do. We know what we need to work on.
Well, it's good that we got that out of the way with. Now that we can finish off the season strong, because I really do think that each game we're getting better and better. Everyone themselves is fixing what they're weak on. And I think if we keep on playing together and practice hard, we'll do all right.
We talk about this a lot with the Lackawanna leagues. It feels like things really start to move and fast forward all of a sudden once you get to January. Is it the same thing for you guys? Like, before you know it, you're into I know the upper divisions don't necessarily have first and second half, but you're kind of into the second half of your schedule, your league schedule before you know it. Does it feel that way for you guys?
Yeah, it definitely is flying by. The beginning seemed to drag a little bit, but now it really is coming by pretty fast.
Yeah, I think once the kids get into a regular schedule at school, you're back in school, you're back from Christmas vacation, there's 2 games a week, it really speeds up. And, from a coaching perspective, as far as like you guys coming together and improving, I think that's people fail to realize what the exhibition schedule really is for. The exhibition schedule before the league play is really to get you ready for league play, to find out those weaknesses and to try and gel as a team and to get Coach Hughes and Coach Gibbons to work their magic with you guys and get the wins coming. And I've been lucky enough to coach with those guys on different levels and stuff. And I know how hard they work. So you're in great hands and we know that the Lady Knights will definitely be putting it together.
Now that being said, this is a safe space. So if you have anything to air about Coach Hughes now, this is an okay place to do it.
He'll never see this.
No.
But what's a Coach Hughes practice like for you guys? Is it pretty intense? What do you think?
Hughes, It depends, honestly, on his mood. But he always, the one thing he'll never do, he'll never give up on us. And every day, you know, he spends an hour watching film, and he knows where we need to get better, and he knows where teams are better in like some different points. And I don't know, he just like, we always do something different. And, you know, the beginning of the season was rough, like we said, but so now he's doing things to change that and just kind of working on like more of just like fundamentals instead of like doing drills. Like every practice since I've been playing and her, you start with a 5-minute run, and usually after that we'll go into 11-man. But instead now we're doing things like ball handling and like passing and just like little things we need to work on.
That's great.
That's all. It's good to work on the fundamentals. Now, obviously, we're talking about Coaches versus Cancer here on the Coaches versus Cancer podcast, and we're getting into Suits and Sneakers Week. And what's that kind of like for you guys to be a part of?
Well, we also, Scranton High also has like the club Coaches versus Cancer. We're really into that. Mr. Gibbons, who's also the coach, he runs it. So it kind of means a lot for us too, because he's runs the club and a coach to us.
Right.
And we do a lot. There's a lot of kids in the club. We do this breakfast. We sell T-shirts. We get there like early in the morning. We have meetings. Oh yeah, there's Feed a Friend we do over Thanksgiving. We go to the cultural center and you help with giving food out.
Right.
We collect money from sponsors, and then so we kind of do a lot with it. It actually means a lot too, because a player who we played with last year, her brother had cancer, so we kind of, I don't know, it meant more.
I was gonna say, did that kind of bring it home in a lot of ways for you guys? Because I think a lot of the talk about cancer sometimes is that, well, it's out there and it affects everybody, but it's cliche to say, but until you kind of know someone or until you've been through it, it sometimes it just doesn't click.
Yeah, it kind of just made you care more about everything, like about the meetings, about showing up and being at our games. That we got a lot more support, I think, from even the students.
Right.
We got a bigger student section and kind of made everyone made that family feel a lot better and more, I don't know, like everyone was behind them on it.
That's great. And I know Coach Gibbons and Coach Hughes and Mr. Anderson, the athletic director, Coach Battaglia on the boys' side in Scranton High does such a great job, supporting Coaches versus Cancer over the past years. How about your game, your Coaches versus Cancer game? Are you excited about the game? Does it have a different feel?
Yeah, for sure. It definitely has a different feel just because, just for like girls basketball, I mean, we get a crowd, but it's like nothing crazy, but it just seems so different for the Coaches versus Cancer game, especially with a player and, like a classmate who has cancer. It just like makes a big difference because a lot of people do show up and they support. And like we sold these T-shirts last year for Jalen, and like you'll just see kids who have nothing to do with basketball and they'll wear it. And that's what's so great about Coaches versus Cancer. Like you don't have to be part of like a sport to help or do anything. So it's always really nice.
Right. And I know with your club that you mentioned, the Coaches versus Cancer club that Mr. Gibbons runs, there's a lot of students that aren't athletes that are involved in it.
Yeah, for sure. We have our meetings every Thursday before school. It's annoying to get there early, but we do it. And it's just like, yeah, girls and boys who have nothing to do with basketball always will like do the 50-50 and they'll wear their shirts and they'll come out and support. And then they'll like help with like little things like the Feed a Friend, like we said. So it's really nice. Yeah.
That's great.
What's that like for you guys to kind of be a part of that philanthropy and then kind of see the community come together and kind of help someone out in need?
It actually makes you feel really good because you're doing it for a reason. Like you could see everyone's getting into it, and it's not just like everyone really does care, and you could see everyone come together, and you can even tell just because, like Soph said, the girls' games aren't really the biggest deal, and then people really do come out for those games. And the boys' game, we get a big crowd. We do sometimes a half-court shot. There's always people volunteering to work the 50-50.
Right.
Everyone wants to do something.
Coaches versus Cancer has obviously kind of gotten bigger here in NEPA, and we've talked a lot on this podcast about its ability to grow across the state. If someone's watching or listening to the podcast and they're on the fence trying to figure out how to make it work, what's kind of your pitch to them to become a part of Coaches versus Cancer?
I just think like everything helps no matter what. Like even if it's something little or like something big, like everything helps. And it's like so appreciative. Like people really do appreciate things, like even like little things. And I think if they're just like trying to help in any way, shape or form, like it really does make a difference.
It always helps to have more people involved, I think.
For sure.
That's it. That's the lesson we take away from that anyway. Alyvia, Svetovich, Sophia, Glogowski, we appreciate you guys joining us here on the Coaches versus Cancer podcast. Congrats on your success so far this year, and good luck the rest of the way.
Thank you.
Thanks. And thanks for all you guys do with Coaches versus Cancer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So thanks to Alyvia Svetovich and Sophia Glogowski from Scranton High School for joining us here on the Coaches versus Cancer podcast. And, they talked about the growing pains a little bit that I'm sure all teams kind of go through, especially after losing, some top scorers and trying to figure out who's going to kind of lead the team. You're always going to have those growing pains at first, but it seems like they're starting to figure it out a little bit. Have won their last 2 games. And if nothing else, they have the right attitude about it. And that's kind of what you want as a coach, right? Is for someone to kind of grow past that and know what you need to do to succeed.
Yeah. And one of the great things about the game of basketball is it's a journey throughout the season. And I think the girls at Scranton are finding their way through that journey, because in the beginning of the year, if you remember on our last podcast when we had Coach Hughes here, he talked about their exhibition schedule, Holy Cross, the Lina tournament, some of the other games that they had on their schedule early in the season to prepare them for league play. And you're going to have some ups and downs. And these kids, especially girls, work really hard. And they don't get the fans or maybe the press that a boys team would, unfortunately. And they work just as hard. And I think that sometimes, when those downs come early, you find out what you're made of as a team. And I know Coach Hughes, and Coach Gibbons, his assistant coach, will get them on track. And I think that's the point that they're at right now. They're get a couple wins under their belt in a row, and they're finding their way through the league, and they'll be better for it.
We say this a lot on this podcast, but there's a lot of good girls basketball teams in our area. I think, we kind of mentioned it at the top of the show. You look at a team like a Dunmore who played Riverside the other night, and they were on TV. They were the featured game, and that was back and forth. It was up and down.
Not only was it the featured game, Riverside High School was sold out. And it was at max capacity.
It was sold out like an hour before tip. I think they had signs up telling people, "Sorry, you can't come in. Go to the cafeteria and watch it in there." You know. And when's the last time that's ever happened for a girls basketball game?
Right. No, it's great, and it should happen, because they work just as hard as the guys. And a lot of times you'll hear people say that they don't want the game on television because then people won't come to the game. Well, that wasn't true the other night. I mean, they were packed and it was on television. So it's a testament to the Riverside and Dunmore communities, and it's a testament to how the quality of girls basketball.
And it's not even just the high school girls in our area. You look at something, like what Coach Trevor Woodruff is doing at the University of Scranton. That's a perennial top 10 team in the NCAA. Coach Jason Ryan and Misericordia, they're undefeated for the first time, and I can't even remember how long, and one of the top teams in the MAC. They're receiving votes just outside the D3hoops.com polls. I mean, there's a lot of solid, Coach Machaco, even Coach Tara Machaco at Marywood had success for 15 years at Marywood, which was never really known as a basketball power. And she turned them into a perennial 10+ win team before she took over at Wilkes this season. I mean, there's a lot of really solid basketball, girls and women's basketball pedigree in our area.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's great to see, and it's great to watch and be a part of.
Absolutely. So we're going to talk now with Coach Rich Emmons from Elk Lake and kind of get his perspective with Coaches versus Cancer. It's the Coaches versus Cancer podcast presented by Fidelity Bank. And now we're talking to the head coach of the Elk Lake boys basketball team here in Northeast Pennsylvania, Coach Rich Emmons. Coach, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me on. Glad to be down here on this cold Monday morning.
It could be warmer, that's for sure.
That is correct.
But we're in kind of the throes of it now in January. And Coach, what's kind of happening so far in the 2018-2019 year for you guys? I mean, now you're about halfway through the season, getting towards the end of the first half, or just at the end of the first half in the Lackawanna League. What's kind of your assessment so far?
Early on, we front load our schedule. We had Carbondale, Tunkhannock, Wallenpaupack, some bigger schools for us, and we started out 0-3, but then we got in with some schools that were more our size, Wyalusing and Northeast Bradford, and picked up a couple wins. And so far, we're 5-8, and we're just starting to get in that league play. We started, most of our games were on the road. Had a couple of home games last week, picked up a big win on Friday against Montrose, a little come from behind win, which got the guys' spirits up. But it's been an up and down. But I think our guys, as the season has went on, since we're a little bit older, we know what to expect. We're going to have more home games, and I think we can get on a little run here.
Coming into the season, I think a lot of the talk was losing 5 seniors from last year's team and kind of what would happen from there. And you just kind of mentioned it. You've got some upperclassmen. How much does that kind of help as a coach to kind of have that experience returning or have that leadership returning? And what can you do with that?
Early on, the biggest thing for us was having those seniors because they could dictate a pace of practice. They could have a practice and we could institute plays and sets and just the main focuses for us offensively and defensively. They could set that tone. All of them had a little bit of starting experience, but we did lose last year's Player of the Year in Division 4. So that was a lot of scoring to replace. So as the first part of the season went on, we had to figure out how to score the ball without having that one person there. But those seniors definitely helped that process. It's pretty rare situation when you have to replace 5 seniors with 6 more. So that's one of the benefits to having a team where we end up having 2 large groups together. That doesn't always happen, but it was beneficial to us.
Now, Elk Lake competes in 2A here in Pennsylvania, but there, even for being a smaller school, it has such a rich history of basketball and a lot of passion with it up there as well. What's that like for you now in your 3rd season at the helm to kind of harness that and kind of know that history is there and try to live up to that?
One of the nicest things about Elk Lake is the boys basketball team is never competing with another sport. Boys basketball at Elk Lake is a sport, and it's been that way for a long time. Coach Mike Red Wallace started out back in the 50s. He came in and he set that tone. They were able to get themselves 2 state championships, 1969 and 1977. And just having that background and that history has always given us a lot of pride. There's no bigger event on a Friday night during the winter than an Elk Lake basketball game. So that's always been a situation where that's been to our benefit. And to harness that, it's really been difficult. Coach Wallace's record and accomplishments speak for themselves. Not long after Coach Wallace, we had Coach Ron Kropp, and Coach Kropp won over 300 games. So there's been some guys in the program that have really been there for extended periods of time and were able to win a lot of games. John Winero, who I replaced, won over 150 games. Mm-hmm. So having coaches before you, they set a tone in the program, and that tone you just hope you can carry over. And it is lofty shoes to fill, but it's something that the community embraces, the coaching staff, the kids. We all know that's the expectation, so that's what's enjoyable.
As a former coach at Lackawanna Trail in the same division as Elk Lake, going into that gym on a Friday or Tuesday night was always a task. You always knew, you were going to get a good basketball game against a team that's always prepared. Coach Winero and I had some great battles, but the community is so important to those kids that play for you, and it's just a great atmosphere. That whole division, every night, you go into these gyms. They're small gyms, but they're filled to the gills, and it's great atmosphere.
Well, I was going to say, it's got to be a different, especially now you coaching at Scranton Prep with some of the bigger schools in the area. I love that small school, small gym feel still when you kind of go back to that and, everybody's kind of closed in on each other and it's just, it's a different kind of atmosphere in a way.
It's our division, as you said, they're small gyms. So when you put 800 fans in there, there's 800 fans in there. They're not spread out. It's usually bleachers on both sides that are, 6 deep, and it's packed, and that's right. What makes it enjoyable. Fans are on top of you. They're on top of the game. The refs, everybody's in the refs' ear. We have hundreds of coaches and hundreds of officials in the stands every night, but that's what makes it fun. And over the past couple of years when I started, I think what's helped is everybody started to kind of go up. Everybody has a senior-laden team this year, maybe for the exception of Forest City. And it's really made the division more competitive, which has made those atmospheres even better.
Right.
We've went into a couple gyms this year, and it's the most fans I've ever seen, during my tenure, although it's short, but I've been in those gyms for the past 15 years with playing and coaching at Susquehanna. It's been great. It's been wonderful.
I think the thing that we've talked about too here on this podcast about at least the area basketball has been the competitiveness overall in District 2, whether it's the Lackawanna Leagues or the Wyoming Valley Conference, Abington Heights, I think serves as a shining example of that, winning the state championship last year. Is that kind of your experience, Coach? You've been obviously around for a minute now, and you've kind of seen basketball and the competitiveness grow. How good is District 2, and how much does that kind of prepare you for, playoffs later on, or anything, that might go further than that?
When you compete in District 2, every single year, it might be Holy Cross, and you give the example of Abington or Scranton Prep where Coach Kettel's at. Every year, there's a team that makes a run, 2-3 games into states. Abington Heights captured a state title last year, but every year there's someone that makes a run, so you know how competitive it is. And before we went to 6 classifications, I mean, you look at AA, there was no tougher AA, in my opinion, because you'd have Holy Cross and Mid-Valley, Riverside, Elk Lake, Dunmore, Old Forge. Well, at that time, they were single A, and now AA. You had some really competitive teams, and that still carries over a lot. There's not as many teams in AA, but all the AAA schools, Mid-Valley and Riverside, that we all play in crossovers. In Lakeland this year is having an outstanding year.
Right.
That prepares you when you go out and play a team from District 4. Your level of competitiveness is usually a little different. Or if you go up in New York State, which we have in the past, we're prepared. We might not be better, but we're prepared for tight games, physical defenses, teams that, can get up and down. There's a lot of different styles that we see. So it really prepares us down the road.
We're talking with Coach Rich Emmons from Elk Lake here on the Coaches versus Cancer podcast presented by Fidelity Bank. And Coach, let's transition to Coaches versus Cancer. Elk Lake has obviously been a big help in kind of what you've been able to do, Coach Kettel, with Coaches versus Cancer and NEPA through the years. And what has that been like? We talked about community spirit and people kind of pitching in and supporting the basketball team, but to support Coaches versus Cancer, what's that been like to kind of see that grow?
Coaches versus Cancer, it's really went on a whole nother level at Elk Lake. And I started out coaching JV prior to Elk Lake at Susquehanna, and we did a really good job to grow it. And at the same time, you're watching from afar, and now to be a part of it, just the level at which that community embraces that. When we have our Coaches versus Cancer game, maybe other than our Montrose game, Coaches versus Cancer, that gym is a standing room only. We have to put seating up on our stage that we have there. And it's unbelievable to the level at which the community comes out to support it, whether it be buying T-shirts, donating for raffle baskets, or just, in fact, donating money, and the things that the school does and the community does to try to raise. Everybody, it seems, gets behind it. And we don't have to go out and beg people to be a part of it. We don't have to beg people to come in and, come in the gym and watch the game. They come on their own. One of the first questions we get when we set up the schedule is, well, what's your Coaches versus Cancer game? Because people want to be there. They want to be a part of that event because it is special in the things that we do. And when I was making our letter for sponsorships this year, I contacted Nino down at the American Cancer Society, and I said, Nino, can you give me a total? And since 2014 alone, I mean, I was shocked. We've raised that up like $90,000.
Wow,
unbelievable!
It's unbelievable. And you're talking about a district that has about 80, 90 kids per grade. So it's not a big district as far as student population, but the involvement in the group is just unbelievable.
When you go up, I've had the pleasure to go to a couple of the Elk Lake Coaches versus Cancer games over the past years. We had some games on TV, and I just wanted to go up and see it and be a part of it. The atmosphere is terrific. Everyone is into it. And over now this is our 11th year of Suits and Sneakers here in Northeast Pennsylvania. I just feel like the kids now and the players, like Coach alluded to, when's the Coaches versus Cancer game? What's the date? It's an event now. And it's not just a regular game on the schedule. It brings another level of anticipation and I think the kids play on a higher level and there's it's an emotional night with the whole cancer speeches and all of that. So it's just a great atmosphere. And it's not only Elk Lake, there's a ton of schools, but I think Elk Lake has set the bar locally.
It feels like it rivals probably senior night in a lot of ways.
It does. And there's 2 games that we always say we don't want to lose, because senior night, you never want to lose because you don't want to send your seniors off that way. And Coaches versus Cancer, because it is a big game, and we can do the things, we can wear pink or we can wear a shirt, but when you get a group of people and players that really understand, like, this is what it's for, this is what we're raising money for. It's not just, hey, we get to wear different clothes. This is what we're trying to accomplish. We're trying to put ourselves in position to raise money, and kids they take it more seriously than senior night, because they have so many family members there, and they take it personally for people they know who have been affected by it, and people that they see struggling day in and day out with these different types of cancers. And, this is where it takes on that personal part. And that's what makes it special.
And I think one of the things that I've felt with my teams over the past 10 years with Coaches versus Cancer is, it's bigger than the game, that night. It's bigger than the team. It's bigger than the game. It's bigger than the outcome of the game. So, it does. It makes the kids really feel like they're playing for more than just themselves or their teammates.
And I couldn't agree more. It's really gotten to the point now where I think at first everybody was almost afraid to show how excited they were. It was, okay, well, where do we start? And now kids, like, now they take, they really do take it personally. And across the board, I've been in many gyms over the past 8 years coaching JV and varsity, and I've seen a lot of events, and it's special because each school does it their own way.
Yep.
Nobody's trying to copy each other. I've seen video of Scranton Preps, and I know what we've done at Susquehanna and at Elk Lake, and I've been at Blue Ridge, I've been at Lackawanna Trail, and I've been to these different places, and everybody does a little bit different, which makes it unique for them and special. And it's always nice to go in there and see that.
Now, Coach Emmons, you obviously talked about personal connections to Coaches versus Cancer. You yourself are a cancer survivor.
Yep.
What I guess to start, what kind of happened? How did this kind of start for you and your fight with cancer?
Back in 2008, it was my first year teaching at Susquehanna Community High School, which is where I teach, and I coach at Elk Lake. And it was my first year teaching. And in January, I was just getting ready for school one day, and I found a lump between my groin and my hip. And I thought, well, it might be a hernia. I better go to the doctors. And so I went there. The doctor didn't seem concerned. And the next day, he called me back at school, and they said, you need to leave school immediately. Your blood count is super, super low. So I went down, and immediately they asked me to have a colonoscopy and a couple other things done because they felt that it was Crohn's or colitis, and it wasn't that. And that kind of set the ball rolling. And in the time span of 4 months, it finally took a doctor who just flat out said, you know what, we're going to go in and take out that lymph node and really see, because they couldn't tell what it was.
Right.
In April, they finally did that. And within 10 minutes of finishing up, the doctor was in. He said, I'm afraid to tell you have Hodgkin's lymphoma. He said, you're lucky though. He said, because it's something that's extremely treatable. And on April 11th of that year, I was diagnosed with stage 3 Hodgkin's lymphoma. So it seems like, I hear different stories where people go into the doctors and it's, they knew right away. They said, hey, you have it. And this was from January till April before they knew. And it was nothing against anybody. Nobody could get a concrete answer. And he finally did. And on May 2nd, I did my first treatment for Hodgkin's lymphoma up at Hematology and Oncology Associates up in Dunmore with Dr. Manuelson. And I went there and I did 6 months of chemo every 2 weeks. And it was a fight. Not so much. I was fortunate. I was probably, if you could catch something, I was 24 years old. You're strong. You're young. It was just at the right time. I always say I'm glad I got it, not somebody that was older, because I was young enough and strong enough to fight it. And people don't realize, they see the physical differences. Your hair falls out. Maybe, you're weak, you're skinny, you're losing weight, but they don't see the mental aspect. They don't see the mental aspect on you, and they don't see it on your family, and really what it takes to support somebody through that. I was fortunate. I had the Susquehanna School District where I worked. That community was outstanding. I was just a guy who had stepped in their community 4 months before that, and they were just unbelievable. Elk Lake, that's where I grew up. That's where I lived. They were just outstanding as well, supporting me and my family, giving us an opportunity. They raised money, not that anybody asked or set up. It was just people would come to your door and say, hey, we want to help. We want you to, we want to make sure you're okay. And it really, it was a time in your life where now after 10 years, I just celebrated being in remission in October for 10 years. So that was a big moment. Sure. And, looking back on it, it seems like a blur, but at the time it just, it was such a long process because you almost went, by the time you got done with treatments, you had been going through it for 10 months.
Right.
And it's just, it almost seems surreal now to look back on it.
Wow.
It's an incredible story. And I feel like sometimes that is we hear a lot of similar stories when we talk to people about this, where same thing that you went through, weren't sure what it was, went to a couple different doctors, still no answer until somebody's finally like, look, like we got to test it for this because there's nothing here. And then luckily, in a lot of these stories that we are talking about, they were able to catch it in time, which it sounds like that was the case with you. And like you mentioned, the mental aspect is something we've talked about on the podcast too, where people obviously see what happens on the outside, but they don't understand the day-to-day toll it takes to get to appointments and to buy groceries and equipment and other things you may need that just to kind of move forward week to week.
And going through it, I knew it was going to affect me physically. And I was the person that would always push myself. I pushed myself for all those treatments. I never wanted to throw up once. I said, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. And I got through, but I never realized how much it affected me mentally. About halfway through, I went to the doctors one day, and I just, my cousin was a physician's assistant there, and I just broke down crying. And it was more so the anxiety and the stress.
Right.
And it got me every day, because I would do my treatment on a Friday and you would wait 2 weeks. Well, the whole week before that, you knew it was coming. You knew you're going to feel terrible. You're going to be, sick to your stomach. You're going to be tired, be worn out. Your back would hurt. You might have to go back in to get a shot for white blood cells, which made your body ache. And it got to the point where, I needed something to get me through that anxiety part. And, we don't ever measure how stressful it was on our family. And the part with it being so stressful on our family is just, not that my family ever told me, but looking back, how much it bothered them. And I was 24, and, I had to go home. I was, when I was teaching, I was living on my own. I had to go home and live with my parents because I need to make sure I ate well. I need to make sure that, I got to appointments. I just couldn't, I couldn't keep up at that rate. I'm 24. Like, I wasn't going to, cook a 3-course meal for myself.
Right.
Mom will, dad will, but
most healthy 24-year-olds aren't going to do that.
No, never. So, that was important. And I don't think when we look at it, we started to look at caregivers. And a lot of times when we talk about this at the Coaches versus Cancer breakfast, we always talk about caregivers and the support that you need. And those people are so paramount that, we can't even quantify what they mean. Just to know you have somebody to support you and get you there. Those people are so important.
And Coach, you mentioned like the communities from Susquehanna and Elk Lake going above and beyond and doing things for you and your family. And then your support team of your family. I think that's the one thing that we can all say we're the most proud of locally in Northeast Pennsylvania is it's kind of who we are. When we're up against things, we kind of come together and have each other's back. And I think that goes hand in hand with the Coaches versus Cancer program throughout Northeast Pennsylvania, and all these schools coming together, and we're all on the same team this week in the Suits and Sneakers week. And that's the one thing that I think we can be the most proud of.
I couldn't agree more. The communities that we live in, we're very prideful. We want to do things correctly. It doesn't matter if I'm from Susquehanna County. It doesn't matter if you're Wyoming, Lackawanna County, Luzerne, Wayne County. These schools want to do the right thing.
Yep.
These schools want to raise money. They want to represent our area and show what kind of communities we have. And we're very, very passionate. We've seen terrible, terrible things happen in our communities, unfortunately. We've seen, disasters, tragedies, and our communities up here always step up. They always support whoever needs the help, whatever it is, they go above and beyond.
We're talking with Coach Rich Emmons here on the Coaches versus Cancer podcast presented by Fidelity Bank. And Coach, I wanted to ask you, what perspective do you think what you've been through has kind of given you, whether it's with basketball or just in life in general? What kind of did you kind of take away from that?
As a person, it changed me because I think I'm a lot more calm, and I'm a lot more, I see things. I don't get worked up over the small things. And I see the bigger picture that, a missed bounce pass probably isn't as big of a deal as it used to be, or, getting mad about something at work or at home. It's not as big of a deal. And, I look at Coaches versus Cancer, and I actually got started when Andrew, he called, I was living with Lawrence Tompkins. We were a bunch of young bachelors teaching at Susquehanna, and he called up, he said, Lawrence, wasn't your roommate a guy from Elk Lake? Wasn't he diagnosed with cancer about 2 years? And Lawrence is like, yeah. And he's like, well, did you want us to be at the breakfast? And I'm like, okay, all right, here we go. And it's funny because that actually got me back into the basketball part of it.
Yeah.
And I went to the breakfast and I spoke and had a good experience. And at the time, Scott Glidden said, hey, why don't you work the clock? And I'm like, okay, whatever. It's free money. So I did it. And after 2 years, I was right back in, coaching. And looking back at it, I'm glad that stuff happened because, it does connect two things. Cancer was a big part of my life. And, coaching probably got me back on some type of a normal level.
Right.
Got me back to where I was before, because before I got sick, I had coached at Lake Lehman and Elk Lake and then at Susquehanna. And, it kind of got me back to my life and things being normal. So Coaches versus Cancer was a huge part of getting me back to where I am now.
And, before we let you go, we want to make sure we talk about it being Suits and Sneakers Week here in NEPA. And you guys got a big event coming up here. You could talk about that and also how important it is. We've talked about schools, especially out in District 4, kind of in central Pennsylvania, District 11, just below us in the Lehigh Valley, even schools out in Western Pennsylvania, either on the fence or starting to think about Coaches versus Cancer. Like, how important is it to get involved?
Well, to start our Coaches versus Cancer game, we decided to, kind of set our own date. We're going to go on February 1st against Susquehanna. One, because of the connection, but two, because I know we're going to put a good crowd in there.
Right.
And I want to be able to raise the most money I can. And when we were talking about other districts getting involved with this, and we're all competitive coaches. There's not one guy that coaches basketball or female that coaches basketball that's not competitive. But the one thing I do know is that most of us have connections with other programs and other teams. And I think those connections in areas that are thinking about getting started and want to step up to the next level, those are the connections that you need to really take advantage of. You need to get together as a group and connect and say, this is what we want to do. This is our cause. Now let's make the most of it, because we can make a huge difference. And we talked about, my cancer was, cured 40, 50 years ago. That was probably cured because of some money at some point. Some guy wasn't just in his garage and figured it out.
Right.
He was going through, different experiments and testing, and he found a cure.
Right.
And if it wasn't for people like that, I honestly, I wouldn't be here today. But we want to make sure there's more people that are in my position that have cures for their cancer. So when other districts are looking at it, these are things we can make a difference. And we think it's small, but we look at our grassroots efforts where Andrew started and where we are today. It's two different worlds. It's taken time. It doesn't happen overnight, but we can do so much for our area. And with it being able to stay local, it's phenomenal.
Well, Coach Rich Emmons, we appreciate your time with us. Good luck this season, the rest of the way with Elk Lake. And
Thank you.
We'll certainly see you down the road.
Thanks for having me on, guys. I wish you the best of luck, and I really enjoyed being on. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Rich.
Thank you.
So thanks for Coach Rich Emmons coming on the Coaches versus Cancer podcast here, presented by Fidelity Bank. Tom Ferguson, Coach Andrew Kettel joining alongside me. And, I hadn't met Coach Emmons before we talked to him here on the show. And I didn't know his story, obviously. Didn't realize that at 24 years old, he got diagnosed with cancer. He talked about it in his interview about how he was glad, someone like him, younger, fitter, had it so he could kind of fight it. But at the same time, that's a tough sentence to give somebody who's just kind of getting started in their life.
Yeah, really. Just out of school, just got a teaching job at Susquehanna, trying to become an adult,
Right.
And live on his own, like you mentioned. And then unfortunately, because he was sick and needed the support, had to go back with mom and dad. But, I've gotten to know Coach Emmons, since actually that breakfast in 2008, where he came in and spoke, and we've become, good friends through basketball. And I know that, he's definitely a role model for his players and for everyone in our community, and how to, just keep up the fight and be an inspiration. And now he's leading the boys at Elk Lake, and Elk Lake is our number one when it comes to raising funds for Coaches versus Cancer here in Northeast Pennsylvania. So they've definitely set the bar very high.
Yeah, they have a community that just rallies around that. And, we talked with him about the history of basketball at Elk Lake and how important it's always been. And just to kind of have that added element of someone who's been through that and is leading the team, I think that just kind of brings that community together even further and kind of drives that point home of, listen, this can affect any of us, and it's affecting someone in our sphere of influence, and it's important to rally around that person.
Yeah. And the one person who we didn't mention, but I will mention now, is Terry Blazier. Terry is a teacher at Elk Lake. Her husband, Tony, is the athletic director, and the Blazer family has really spearheaded the Coaches versus Cancer campaign at Elk Lake. Obviously, the coaching staffs and the players and the community are behind it, but Terry Blazer has taken the lead on it, and I know she's driven it to the heights that it's at right now.
Right.
And we can't thank Terry and Tony Blazer and the Blazer family and everyone in the Elk Lake community enough for continuing to really just raise the bar for Coaches versus Cancer here locally.
Well, obviously, it's Coaches versus Cancer Suits and Sneakers Week here in NEPA, and talking about that here on the Coaches versus Cancer podcast. And Coach, how important is this week for the overall fundraising efforts of Coaches versus Cancer?
It's important. I mean, we have a lot of sponsors that are out supporting all the games. You'll see them on our T-shirts. You'll see them on all of our advertisements and our print of our programs and so on. The Brian Fragioni Foundation, which is a group of friends who are together remembering their friend Brian Fragioni, who passed away. They're our Suits and Sneakers sponsor for the week, so they're sponsoring us this week. Commonwealth Health is our presenting sponsor, and of course, Fidelity Bank is the sponsor of this podcast. So the sponsors are a huge part of it too. We can't thank everyone enough for continuing to support this now 11 years locally, and both locally and nationally. I mean, if you turn on your TVs this week and you're watching college hoops, you're going to see coaches on the sidelines with their sneakers on. It's not just here in Northeast Pennsylvania, it's across our whole country, hopefully at all levels of basketball. So it's a big week. And if you want to get involved, go to a high school game, go to a college game in your area, support, make a donation, buy a shirt, whatever you can do to help is really what we need to do this week.
And there are people still jumping on board with Coaches versus Cancer. We were talking before we started recording about how District 4 out in central Pennsylvania is starting to come along with Coaches versus Cancer, the North Central chapter of PA, and some of those teams finally kind of coming on board and having their own Suits and Sneakers weeks and fundraisers and whatnot.
Yes, the Lehigh Valley and the Poconos are on board this year.
Yeah.
Allentown Central Catholic has kind of spearheaded the Lehigh Valley and the Pocono area with Coaches versus Cancer. So they're on board this year.
Right.
We're trying to roll this out throughout the whole state of Pennsylvania. And we have a national committee, high school committee that I have the pleasure to sit on and talk in conference calls once a month. And we're really trying to get more schools, initiatives, programs started throughout the country so that it's not just college based, it's high school, college, and basically every level and any sport.
So again, if you're watching and listening to the podcast and want to know how to get involved, this is a perfect way to at least start, is to kind of see how all these other schools are doing it and to become involved with Coaches versus Cancer, because this is episode 3, but I think the resounding message of every episode we've had here has been how important it is to be involved and to continue to not just sit there and say, I kind of want to, but I don't know how to make, just do it. Just find a way.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think this week is a great week to get out to a high school basketball game in our area.
Mm-hmm.
If you haven't been to a high school basketball game in a while and you've been thinking about it, or you read the paper or you watch the news and you see the highlights and you know of a team or your alma mater that is playing well, or you want to go see someone, maybe your friends' kids are on the team. And this is the right week to go.
Right.
Because it's bigger than basketball. I know we've been saying that repeatedly, but it's bigger than basketball. It brings a lot of great people together around the best game in the world. So this is the week to go check out some high school hoops.
So Suits and Sneakers Week here in Northeast Pennsylvania with Coaches versus Cancer. And that does it for the 3rd episode of the Coaches versus Cancer podcast. Our thanks to Fidelity Bank for helping us out, sponsoring the show, 25/8 Studios here for helping us put this together. And Coach, appreciate it. And we'll see you for episode 4.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely.